Hi, Brian here, and today I'm going to present my PCC journey, or what I like to call the metaphysics of spiderwebs. To begin, I want to tell you that I used to think of a journey as a road or path, sort of in the fashion of Robert Frost. What happens along the way depends on the road taken or not taken. Then my journey brought me to PCC where, as Frost notes, that has made all the difference. So, between you and me, let's describe my PCC journey as a sort of non-linear constellation of encounters with thinkers and ideas before and after getting here. And by non-linear, what I mean is that while each encounter has occurred at a particular moment in time, some have been revisited in thought and memory, sometimes more than once. Some encounters are more important than others. Some encounters connect to others by strands of thinking which appear out of sequence. And as the strands between ideas become more traveled, they become stronger and stickier. These are the recurring motifs and themes of thinking and memory. And sometimes the strands of thinking become habitual, and I travel along those quite often. Others are completely novel. So the metaphor of a journey suggests putting one foot in front of the other, over and over again. Each footstep corresponds to the implacable march of time. You can never go back. Each encounter represents points of experience which combine both the memories of thoughts that we already have and the novelty of connections with new thoughts. In the thinking journey, everything is out of sequence. It's kind of like, imagine if Whitehead had a love child with a spider. The thinking journey is a spider web, not a road. Anyway, here are some waypoints in my journey worth telling the tale. And it begins with the demarcation between the before I got to PCC and the after. And that, my friends, is a visit to the Freud Museum in Vienna, Austria in September 2022. It was at the same time that I began my studies here. The Freud Museum is in Vienna, and the building contains the apartment where Freud lived with his wife and family, and the office where he received his patients. There is also a library there now, which was closed when we got there. There's a trendy cafe and a small bookstore. And I was there with my favorite human, my daughter. Between the two of us, it has become our mission to plunder the world's bookstores of their treasures. And on that day, I happened to liberate a copy of Eric R. Kendall's book, In Search of Memory. Anyway, it was a few short weeks into that first semester that the metaphor of spiderwebs appeared in my personal Umwelt, and it has become a very sticky idea ever since. I expect that must be obvious by now. The spiderweb motif first appeared to me in a quote by Fraser. He said, "Flies not caught do not exist for the spider." As you will see, this has changed the way I think about the world. Of course, I had encounters with Freud before the Freud Museum. The museum is mostly an exhibit of reading displays, and the famous spectacles are still there, but the cigar and the couch and the cat, was there ever a cat? Those are long gone. You see, Freud took all the important furniture with him when he left for England on June 4th, 1938. That was months after the onslaught, which brought the Nazis to Austria, and for which the Austrians have to this day yet to take any responsibility. Why does that even matter? Well, for one thing, I have for a very long time self-identified as a creature of history. History comprises the occasions which may not be my own lived experience, but they brought me here today. You see, facts matter, dates matter. It's all about time, the before and the after. At least that's what I used to think. Now I wonder if meaning is more important. Meaning. Speaking of which, in March of 2016, I was studying clinical mental health, and I wrote a brief paper, a reflection really, comparing Freud's psychoanalysis to Viktor Frankl's meaning-based logotherapy. Frankl is the author of Man's Search for Meaning, and in the paper, I mused that perhaps many of Freud's theories had always been destined to fall, because they failed to account for the impact on the development of the human psyche of trauma and the horrors of war and the Holocaust. On the other hand, Frankl's thinking, which is demonstrably less famous, endures today nonetheless. It answers both the challenges of childhood and the experience of trouble and trauma later on in life. Furthermore, Frankl's theory of meaning has long become a foundational concept of how I see the world. Yes, Frankl's book has become a foundational notion of thinking about difficult experience, mental health, and how to navigate events in the world. Essentially, what he wrote is that if you have a reason why you must survive, it becomes a powerful tool in the doing so. I had long since read Frankl when the appearance of his name caught my attention in relation to an article about resilience, which appeared in Harvard Business Review's must-reads. According to the writer Diane L. Couteau, author of the piece, meaning is one of three components necessary to building resilience. In my recounting of that experience, I cited Couteau that resilience is the ability to remain steadfast in the face of adversity and to be able to return to the fight after hardship. It is the quality of endurance or determination in the face of challenge. That year that I first encountered resilience was 2012. I was on my way to participate in a 2-week field course hosted by Boulder Outdoor Survival School in Boulder, Utah. The course, which taught minimalist survival, was one of the most difficult self-inflicted challenges I've ever faced. Frankl, of course, helped me complete that journey, and he changed my worldview. Meaning, for Frankl, of course, falls into what I consider to be the imagination of utility, which basically means, how do we solve problems? How do we get through difficult times or challenges when the answer is neither obvious or certain? Let me tell you another of my favorite quotes from my philosophical studies at PCC. It comes from Isabel Stenger's book, Making Sense in Common, a reading of Whitehead in Times of Collapse. In it, Stengers writes, "The left has a vital need for people to think, while the right requires them to comply with the self-evident order of things." And though Stenger's quote appears to be political in nature, I do not favor that opinion. Stengers was describing Whitehead's notion of common sense. I like to imagine that Stengers is positing a truism that applies to many universes of human thought or dictionaries of thought. All traditions and avenues of inquiry have their conservatives, their orthodoxy, and the faithful. While on the other side, there are the progressives, the free thinkers, the Protestants, and the rebels. One side protects the traditions and allows the message to be transmitted faithfully from one generation to the next, while the other side adds to the understanding and adapts to changes in the world and the environment. One side strengthens the strands of the spider web, and the other side sees the web grow bigger and more efficient. Both sides, you see, are needed to maximize the efficiency of catching flies. And I love the Stenger's quote because it alludes to a theme that is present in what is far and away my favorite new book, called The Lantern of Tai Chi, and this from the Shameless Plug department. You see, I wrote The Lantern before coming to PCC, and it is published now by Browler Books and available wherever good books are sold. In it, I described how Tai Chi depends on those who protect and transmit the traditions, and ideals of the art. It also depends on the innovators who expand understanding to keep the art fresh and vital for current times. The idea of Umwelt, what the Fraser quote described, was coined by Jacob Ixchel. It conveys the idea that every being has a certain area of awareness in its environment. It represents the range of their consciousness and the bounds of the area of their operations. And we can apply this metaphor to human imagination, as I imagine we are meant to. All of a person's thinking, their attention, imagination, etc., may be bound up in the spiderweb of their own construction. I don't necessarily mean caught or stuck, though that may be. People often get stuck in their thinking. What I mean is that the spider web represents thinking itself. The flies caught are the ideas attended to. So what about beyond PCC encounters? Why philosophy? Well, I have a couple of important encounters to tell you about. First, in his science fiction story, The Veldt, Ray Bradbury raises the all-important question, where do the lions come from? It's a fabulous story, a great read, and, my friends, I think it is always a good idea to know where the lions come from. It's like asking, where do ideas come from? And I think about that question quite a lot. Knowing where the ideas come from is really important to me as a writer. You see, I must have faith that they will appear when I need them. Otherwise, there's no writing. Before PCC, faith that ideas would show up required a bit of a leap. Even Bradbury did not offer too much in the way of detail on that process in that particular story. But Kant does, and so does Coleridge. And now, when I take a leap of faith about catching new ideas, I have something of a safety net. Well, a spider web. Kant might suggest that new ideas or intuitions come from the synthesis of concept and precept. There are some things, concepts, that exist beyond direct experience or a priori knowledge. We can reason those, but we don't have direct experience of them. And intuition becomes the mechanism that helps us synthesize ideals and experience into new ideas. Then there is Coleridge. He describes the idea of primary and secondary imagination. Primary imagination, of course, is kind of like light. We can't directly experience it. We can only see it when it reflects off of something else or when it is absent. I imagine Coleridge would be amused by the metaphor of imagination as drops of dew suspended on strands of our spiderweb and gleaming in the dawn sunlight. You see, not only do we have flies caught in our web, but sometimes we also get gleaming drops of dew that catch our attention. And this has become my favorite way of thinking about intuition. Second, the other day I had a flash of insight. It's about why philosophy. You see, Kant's critique project, Whitehead's process philosophy, metaphysics, determinism, dualism, objectivism, all of it, it's all about how we organize the mind and our thinking. And that is my latest encounter on the PCC journey. And maybe it's obvious to you, but this realization is new to me. You see, the aesthetic of spiderwebs correlates directly to the efficiency of catching flies. A well-designed, well-organized spiderweb not only offers the most beautiful expression of the spider, both literally and figuratively, but I imagine that a beautiful spiderweb is a far more efficient mechanism for catching flies. I like to imagine that for the spider, its web is analogous to creating a piece of music or art. It has the ability to move the spider to every caught fly. And I also like to imagine that a beautiful spiderweb is also emotionally moving for the spider. And if all of this isn't clear by now, let me offer one concluding encounter. I am already planning book number 2. In the world of linear time, this book does not exist, not yet. In the world of utilitarian imagination, I still have to figure out how to write it and what to write about. However, in the thinking post-Freud museum world of PCC, the book certainly already exists. It exists in the world of speculative imagination. You see, I can clearly imagine the title, the cover, the spiderweb of thoughts it presents, and in the speculative imagination, it already exists. I've already got it. And to answer Frankel, it is my why. At least, it's one of my whys. Also, you have just encountered one part of it. Thank you very much for listening. This has been a fabulous opportunity. Thanks very much. All right.